Now, you want to talk about an elaborate setup. Me and my team, we would receive a mission, and we would have 96 hours to plan for the mission. And at the end of that 96 hours, close to it, before it, we would brief back our plan to the commander. Welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And boy, if you see us squinting, it's like the sun doesn't want to cooperate. It's like 1 second it's normal, and then we just keep getting brighter and brighter because, yes, folks, we are in Arizona. That's why Camden, being the native here now, or the natural, you're not a native.
No, transplant.
You're not a native.
I'm a successful transplant. Professional transplant. You're right. I'm not native anyway. I'm a professional transplant.
I'm hydrating in the desert, folks.
Oh yeah, you gotta fight that desert sun.
Yeah, it's beautiful. This is the time to come visit Camden and Tucson.
Yes, sir.
Those of you who are planning your trips down here, this is the time of year to do it, because I've sat in this exact spot about 4 months ago.
Yeah.
And regretted it.
Yeah, you sat here about 7 a.m. and it was probably hotter than this.
Yep. Yep. And I know at 9 p.m. It was definitely hotter than this, and the sun had been down for 2 hours.
Yeah. So, ain't it something out here?
Yep. That's why this is the time of year to be here. And there's a gap between those two times.
Yes, sir.
And that's what we're going to talk about today is the gap. It is weird. Sorry. I'm doing this weird thing, leaning over like that. That's, I don't know if that's a back issue, a chair issue, or a mental issue.
All the above.
But it's created a gap.
Yes, sir.
And what we wanted to talk about was a different kind of gap, a gap that most folks don't really talk about. And Camden, I'm gonna put this to you and credit you with it, because we were doing a strategy talk, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months ago.
Yep.
Maybe I was out here sweatboxing it when we were doing that talk, and you came up with this great way of thinking about things, and thank you,
Mr. Loogie. Here.
Loogie just
give me your paw so you can at least see the back of your head. There you go.
A guest appearance, which means his brother Gumbo has to follow, because nothing one can't do something without the other.
No, sir.
But back to our gap is the leadership gap.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting way of thinking about things. And I want you to talk a little bit about what you thought or meant when you came up with it, when those two words came together for you.
Yeah, I think the leadership gap, and I actually did Google it and was like, okay, somebody's definitely used that term before, and used it in a little bit of a different context. But the thing that really came to mind is, as a lot of folks know, they've seen our leadership articles. I've been doing those interviews, talking with folks. We talk with a lot of CEOs on the podcast, and just, in the rest of the business, the rest of the work that we do with the business. And one of the interesting things that comes up in our conversation around leadership is how often the leader, the CEO, per se, they have this understanding of leadership. They seem to understand what leadership skills are really important. They seem to understand how to develop some of those skills themselves, all of these kind of things. And then they understand culture and why culture is important. They understand all these things that are really important to leadership. And they could talk to me about them, and they could sound really freaking smart. And then I'd almost always ask them this kind of question of, it's like, well, then why does nobody do it? Why, I wouldn't turn it directly at them, like, hey, Otis, why does no one on your team have leadership then, if you're talking about it, right? It wasn't quite that pointed, but this idea of, well, why, if it all makes sense, you see all of it, you understand all the concepts, why is there not great leadership in your team? And what I think it came down to is where this leadership gap is, that there's something being said by the leader. There's a precedent that the leader is trying to set, and there's a gap between that and the actions that the team is taking. There's a gap between their understanding, the leader's understanding of culture, and the team's understanding of culture. There's a gap between the leader's understanding of the why and the team's understanding of the why. Their actions and how they feed into the team's actions. All of those different things. There's a gap in the understanding. And the reason I like the term gap on that is because it's not like there's this complete lack of it. Usually your team has some concept of what you're talking about with those things, right? A leader inside of your team, even if you're not developing them, giving them all the tools and those kind of things, they still have that natural leadership ability. They're still going to be a leader, but there's a gap between how they're leading and how you're leading, or how you want them to lead. And that gap, I think, comes kind of naturally as a team grows, your business grows, and you're going to, there's less time that you're spending one-on-one. We always talk about around the coffee table, right? Those kind of things. So there's a lot of natural reasons for it, but all that aside doesn't really matter because it's a problem. And that if you're leading at a certain level and your team's not performing there, they don't understand it. Any of those different gaps I identified, any of those different manifestations of the gap, I guess is a better way to put it, it's going to cause problems inside of your team. And one of the big questions I've been pondering since then, and I'll throw this back to you to get our conversation really kicking into high gear here, is, well, then what can you do to prevent that gap? What is the bridge that you build across it? What is the system that you could put in place to keep that in mind, or to keep that from growing to that? Because a lot of folks would go, oh, well, we need more meetings and bringing the team together and all that. And those all can be mechanisms for it, but I could guess if I called up all those CEOs I talked with, they're probably doing those things. So why does that gap keep perpetuating, and what can leaders do to prevent that leadership gap from growing or to bridge it?
Yeah, well, and I want to jump on something too, because anytime I get to use the land navigation metaphor, I'm not going to pass up that opportunity. So think about it this way: that the gap that you have between you and your team, right, is here today. And then the longer you go, the larger that gap becomes. It doesn't, if you don't intentionally do something about it, it's just going to grow. And here's your land navigation metaphor. So 1 degree off on my azimuth, if I walk 100 meters, what's that? 1 meter.
Yeah.
Right? So that's not very far. That's right here. I can still reach it. But 1 degree off on 1,000 meters, well, that's grown. That's 10 meters. I can't just reach it. If I go 10,000, and we keep going out and out and out and out on these distances, think about that. It's 1 degree, but 1 degree over distance, AKA time, when we're talking about this with this leadership gap, think about how big that's growing. Right? It goes from, oh, yeah, they were pretty close, to what the hell are those guys doing? I'm over here, we're making a widget, and they're making a pidget. I don't know what a pidget is, but I don't know what a widget is. But the point is that you're so far off. You're on completely different planets. Ooh, almost made you spill your coffee.
You're all right.
I'm all excited because I got room to maneuver here since we're outside. And the thing that you got to do, you first off, admit it.
That's,
just like any problem, realize that there's a problem. That's always step one to solving the problem. Realize there's a problem. Then identify the problem. Okay, I got a leadership gap in my team, between me and my team. And what's going to happen, and I just thought of this too, by the way, the larger the steps, the more steps there are, it's just like land navigation. So it's not just time, but it's also stepping down.
Yeah.
So if I've got 5 layers between me and the doer, at each layer of hierarchy in my team, that leadership gap is increasing. It's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Is it, I was going to ask, is it, because I think there's a factor of this in there, and I'm sure there's more beyond it, but how much of that do you think is just the telephone game? You know, the fact that it has to get filtered through that many people just creates natural variations, which then perpetuate into a leadership gap.
Yes, but that's only if you accept it, the telephone game. Because the telephone game is great as a demonstration of putting a group of people together and having them pass a message around. There's zero culture in that, because what we're doing, we're just playing a game, right? And it's fun, and it's a great demonstration of the problem.
Right.
In the inability to communicate, and what I say is not what you hear. But if you create a culture in that sense of, let me repeat back what you just said. Let me make sure I understand. Or the other side of it is, well, let me make sure you understand.
Right.
We've talked about this as leaders, as coaches, particularly on the sports, in the sports world.
Yeah.
You know, hey guys, I need you to do this. Here's the drill. Any questions? How many people have ever been that guy that's raised his hand, oh, coach, I'm not sure I understand how to do that drill. Who wants to be that guy? Nobody's going to say that. It's the same thing in the shop.
Yep.
Hey guys, we need to do this, this, and this. Any questions? Nope, I ain't going to ask that. Because everybody thinks they're going to look like the dummy.
Yep. And I think that's where and we talked, you're right, I think I've got a whole training on this on our YouTube page, talking about
you
asking
have
questions.
done one, you're right.
The idea of, it's like, okay, well, thinking like the rugby example, well, then it goes back to the why. And you ask them to explain the why back and forth with you. And there's this interesting thing that can happen where there is that game of telephone, people are going to word it differently. You know, if you talk about your team coming from all sorts of different backgrounds, everyone has a different language of how they talk about things. You know, I'll use a funny, quick example. Rugby people are going to love this one. Our Colorado rugby people especially. Hockey stick defense. You know, no one else calls it that. That's not a term outside of Colorado. That's not a rugby term. It's just, we called it hockey stick defense.
Yep.
That was a certain type of defense that we play. Blitz drift, basically, for a lot of folks out there. But the reality is, you have to be able to communicate the key aspects of it. And sometimes that means that there might need to be something that's a little bit more verbatim, but you also have to have the flexibility with it. And what happens with that is you give the person the ability to properly understand it and properly explain it, which then means that they are going to actually remember it. It's no longer an exercise in memorization. This is our company culture. Here are 4 pillars of business. Boom, 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 boom. Memorize those, have them perfect. And then they're just trying to memorize it down the line. That's the telephone game. What we're talking about more is like the actual conversation. If let's take an example of one of my favorite aspects of the game, malls inside of rugby, right? I don't just talk about, we're going to mall. Hey, Otis, what are we going to do on Saturday? We're going to mall. That's right. Why are we going to mall? How are we going to mall? When are we going to mall? What is the meaning behind all of those different actions? When you understand the whys behind it, if you paraphrase, you're losing that game of telephone, but you explain the why, it works just the same.
Well, I'll stop you in there. One other aspect of it that you want your team members to understand is not just why we're going to mall, but what am I doing in the mall, and how am I affecting that outcome, and how do I see myself and my performance in the mall. That's when you're starting to get to that aspect and understanding. You know, you're talking with Joe or Dallas or Nick, and you're saying, hey, so got it. Everybody knows we're going to mall in this situation. Now, what do you do, Nick, in that situation? What do you? Yeah, okay, we're all in agreement. Mall, got it. But what am I doing? So I'm not just in that mall, right? I'm not just in that widget.
And I'll give you the example. It's kind of like, I don't know. I think of it in the business. Let's say you have something. I'm going to use a tagline from one of my businesses, Verbi. Be connected with virtual events was our big thing. BEE, because it's funny. But be connected with virtual events. So if that's our model, that's our mission, right? To help people be connected. Well, what that means to each person is going to be different, and the way they look at that is different. You have to understand how you play into that vision, because your perspective on it is true a lot of the time, but you have to understand how those different perspectives play out. The example comes to mind. Actually, I had this conversation just the other day with one of my engaged coaches, talking about, because we had a big year, and so we're dealing with a lot of the growing pains.
Talk about 10x in growth, folks.
Darn close.
Yeah.
Feels like it.
Yeah.
But the interesting problem that I get to solve now, which is really exciting, is the growing pains of it. And one of the things that is really interesting is, I would always say number one priority out there in Engage is to have fun. What's your favorite thing about rugby? Actually asking you genuinely right now, what's your favorite thing about rugby? What's the thing that you find the most fun?
Teamwork.
Teamwork, right? So if Coach Otis comes out, I say number one thing is fun. So you're going to go back to teamwork over and over again, right? I'll use an example. We had one of my U of A boys out there coaching. He was a fly half. You know what's fun to him? Expansive rugby.
Yep.
Getting the ball to the edges.
How far can I pass to somebody?
And so he's playing fun game, teaching the kids how to play the fun game. And to hit a fly half, that means expansive rugby. I had a prop out there coaching once that just wanted to hit people. And he talked to kids about hitting people. And it's so funny. And that's what he loved about the game. That's what was fun to him. So that use of the word fun didn't really work, right? So you have to be able to understand the nuances of it. And that's where that why, those real conversations come in. Not just what is the thing you like about the game, but what is the thing that that kid likes about it? And how can we take this universal idea of fun and apply it in each of those settings? And when you start to understand that, I think that's how you can close that leadership gap, is by understanding the nuance. The tricky thing here is nuance takes a lot of time and conversation to build. You know, the coach I was sitting down with just the other day talking about it, she and I were on the same page. And I could go out and I could talk to everybody else, and we might be somewhat on the same page, but it's like understanding what that nuance really means is a lot trickier. So if I'm a business owner, let's bring it back to the business space, and I have a leadership gap, and it's because people don't understand the why behind things. They might not have that nuanced understanding of what their role is and how everyone's perspective is different and contributes together and all of that kind of stuff that we're talking about. Well, then what can I do? Kind of going back to, it's like, what's the intervention? You know, getting things back on track. What can I do to shrink that leadership gap, to take that time to build that nuanced understanding? Because I think a lot of folks, and going back to those CEOs I talked with, they're nervous, scared even, to commit to those kind of time. It's like, what, we all got to go spend a week in the mountains at the ranch with Otis to make sure that we understand our why? That seems like a waste of time. We got widgets to build.
It is a method.
Yeah, and so what are your thoughts on how to get through that, whether it's like a true intervention, the systems and those different pieces, to kind of just keep bringing those understandings closer together?
Well, it always starts with yourself, right? You gotta lead yourself, gotta know yourself, gotta be clear in your own purpose. And how does your own purpose dovetail, or is it exactly the same with the business's purpose? Then you're creating the vision, and then you got to sell the vision. And selling the vision is one of the key elements of this to your team, that communication of the vision. And how does my team, just like we were talking about the mall earlier, well, what do I do when we're mauling? How do I fit into this whole thing, into that bigger picture to accomplish the mall, in order to score, in order to win the game, right? We're stair-stepping it that way. And so not only do I as a leader have to have that understanding, my team has to have that understanding. And one of the things that I think, we're talking communication. We haven't used that word, but we're talking all around the communication. One of the things that enables that communication to be more efficient is the common vernacular, the common terminology, the common framework, a baseline of knowledge that we establish in the team. How do we describe this? How do we describe that? What happens when we do this? SOPs, standards of performance.
Yep.
What are the values of the organization? What is the purpose, mission, vision of the organization? Those things, and when people start to understand those things and how their personal values and personal vision align with it, most folks, people, I'll tell you, I don't care whether you as a leader of however $1 million company you've got or $1 billion company you've got a vision, I guarantee there's probably less than 15% of the people on your team, maybe even less than 10%. I'm trying to be optimistic here, on your team that have ever thought about where and what and who they want to be in 5 years, let alone next year, let alone next week. They may play the little, because we're recording this in December, they may play the New Year's resolution game every year, but they're probably falling into that same sense of like 95% of the people have failed at their resolutions by the end of January. If you have to have a level and of understanding amongst your team, and I wanted to share something, because we'll use my Special Forces reference, Green Beret reference, in a lot of things that we've done with our leadership development system, among others. And one of the things that we did in Special Forces is we did mission briefbacks. So now you want to talk about an elaborate setup. Me and my team, we would receive a mission, and we would have 96 hours to plan for the mission. And at the end of that 96 hours, close to it, before it, we would brief back our plan to the commander. Talk about, the commander's sitting there and his sergeant major and his operations officer. So we got the CEO, you got the chief of staff, and you got the COO sitting in the room to translate it to business. All right. We've got those three guys sitting at the table, and me and my team are telling them how we're going to accomplish the mission, and allowing them to ask us questions and understanding of detail of how we're going to perform. That to include, so it's not just those three, but it's their entire staff behind there. So all of their support elements behind there, accounts receivable, accounts payable, HR, you name it, they're all sitting there so that they understand how we're going to perform. And it validates that now myself and my team truly understand the mission, the end state, and the commander's intent. And that's how we demonstrate. Now, in real life, do you have 96 hours? No. But you still have time. You still have some time. And asking a better question, get a better answer.
And I think a key thinking about that, the brief back, the asking questions, right, having them explain it back to you, all those kind of, the different versions of it we've talked about. I think a key there is also, as the leader, recognizing what is your goal there. This is not a test. This is not a quiz. This is not you being fired. This is not whether or not you're going to start Saturday or I'm going to bench you. It is just, what is your understanding of this? Tell it back to me. Not the, there's no wrong answer. No, there's a wrong answer, but it's okay. And this actually gets me into, and this is maybe the next one we'll record, next one of these podcasts we'll record, but the idea around the leadership gap, one of the pieces of it is that there's not this great communication between, not because they're not talking, not because they're not conveying some of these things that we're talking about, but because there's not honest feedback built into it. That was one of the really big things I saw talking with a lot of the HR directors. A lot of CEOs would say, hey, nobody wants me to give them feedback. They're all too scared. I'm going to hurt their feelings. And then my managers are scared to give feedback and all those kind of things. And all the HR directors are like, people want feedback. And it's like, oh, well, how can those things be true at the same time? It's because we want consistent feedback, but not in a punishment kind of sense, right? It's not just, hey, tell me back what I just said. And you're saying and you've got it wrong. It's like, everyone laugh at Otis, what an idiot. No, that doesn't do anything for the team. My goal is to get you to understand it. So I want you to work through that. And then I'll coach you through how to get to the proper understanding of it. When you build up that kind of a culture where you're able to be wrong with that and help people to get better in those certain areas, then that helps to shrink that gap because people don't shy away from you as much. One of the things you talked about, the different levels in leadership, and I was picturing this, you have your 1 degree variation that you're talking about, right? Well, so each level of leadership then is 1 degree, and you get down to that. Now it's a 5 degree variation between me and the doer, right? So same kind of thing goes. You can shrink those by having you guys talk more and those kind of things. They understand the why, that shrinks that down a bit. But if you set up an environment where the person not understanding the why, not understanding the way they fit into the business, their purpose, all those different things, and that's an issue, then now I'm going to lean away and I'm not going to come back to it. One of the ideas that I've been sharing with folks, inspired by these conversations I've had with HR directors and CEOs, is the concept in rugby of work-ons, right? That we have our WOWOs, our work-ons, where the reason work-ons work, one, it's us committing to development, right? You take the time to develop yourself as an athlete, as a rugby player, and get better at your job. That's number one. But number two is because it creates a culture inside of the team where they're now comfortable with me giving feedback. They're coming to me because multiple times a week they're doing work-ons. So if they don't have something to work on, well, they come to me. They come to Coach Duffy. They come to Coach Coco, and they say, hey, Coach, what can I work on? What have you seen that I could get better at? What do you think I need to improve on? And now, because of that same relationship, to take the big picture of it on a Monday and work-ons, right? Now Thursday, when I say, you need to hit that goddamn ruck because X, Y, Z, and I'm laying it all out there like that, they're not thinking, gosh, Coach Cam's mean. They're thinking, no, this is a thing I need to get better at, because they understand our why, they understand what we're all working towards, they understand their piece in it, and we also now have a relationship where we can have those conversations. And I think that's a big key to closing that leadership gap, is the eagerness to have those conversations. If I'm too scared that I might be doing my job wrong, I mean, why would I call you to fire me now? I'll just wait till you come check on me next Friday, and if I'm wrong, then I'll get fired then. I'll get an extra week out of it.
Hide out.
Yeah, exactly.
Hide out longer.
A lot of people do that, I think. And I think as leaders, we let them do that because we don't give them a constructive arena to take that criticism and to get better at it. We expect them to just get better immediately. We expect them to not make mistakes. All these kind of weird things that just don't really make sense performance-wise, but for whatever reason, when we're paying somebody for the job, we just kind of feel the need to. You know, it's to take the exact mantra. I always love this example of buy the Ford Focus and make it expecting it to run like a Ferrari.
Yeah.
Businesses love to do that. And it's like, but because I'm paying you, you should just have to get better at it. And it's like, no, I think if we approach it more in a development sense, like you would see in sports and those kind of things, where it's not just the paycheck means you got to do your job, like help them do their job. And the paycheck is all separate. And I don't know if that part fully makes sense, but I'll go and throw it back to you.
Well, I think it's, I was trying to remember the other part of it, but it is treating your people like they're important as opposed to a commodity.
Yeah.
As long as you are looking at members of your team as just something that gets the job done, you treat them the same way as you would Microsoft Outlook or Gmail. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of organizations, a lot of culture organizations that have that kind of culture. I've been part of them, and it's not the way to do it. If you want to be successful and have a team that wants themselves to achieve, want the team and business to achieve, and not just looking at it as, man, I hope I don't get laid off. I hope I don't get fired. Then it sucks that we didn't win that contract. I hope, that whole thing, you've got to get them bought in. You've got to treat them like they're a human being, like they're an individual contributor to your organization. Back to how do you do that? That's how.
Yeah.
That's how. So, to sum us up, if you start thinking about it, well, you got to have a system. Mm-hmm. That system drives your culture. Your culture drives your system. It's a chicken or the egg thing. And it all starts with you as the leader.
Yep.
Your personal values, your personal purpose, your vision, and how that dovetails with the vision, the business, the business. Ooh, stuck on that word. The business vision.
Yep.
What's the business values, mission, and vision? Mm-hmm. Because now when we have clarity in that and we communicate that, and then we ensure and we ask better questions for that of our team, then our leadership gap can start to shrink.
Yeah, and I want to add one more thing. I think that we look at it too simplistically. I think a lot of these people that I've talked with, it's this idea that like I'm the leader, and then I'm the voice of the culture. I'm the voice. I'm doing all that, and then we have people who manage them to stay in line. And then this will take. Sorry, folks, this is me a little bit longer. But so they're expecting people to come in and be managed to do their job. Talking about hitting their KPIs and making sure they're doing the things and all that. There's no why behind it. They want to build their team to be managed. The difference with building a team to be led is, one, the individual ownership of the people inside that team, team of leaders and that, right? Looking for the leadership. But then also the other thing that does, like, I'm sorry, folks, your manager ain't a beacon of culture. They're not. A leader is, though. And each leader inside of the team is, and I like that word beacon actually, it is a beacon of your culture inside of it, of your values. So instead of being the top down, I'm the CEO and here's how the culture is going to work and everyone just needs to understand it, and you are managed to kept in line with that or we fire you. Now you have all of these different people who understand it. And they're just kind of slowly pushing things out. And what happens then is you have somebody who doesn't understand as well. There is that leadership gap. There's more people around them communicating it properly. The other thing also is when you start to get a gap between those different leadership structures, now we have other people we can rely on. We're open to that conversation. It's not just oh gosh, Otis is going to fire me. I'm worried about all of this. I can talk with the other leader with me. I can talk with somebody on my team who understands that. When you have leaders on your team, leaders in that follower position, you could talk to them just like a leader at your same level, right? I'm thinking specifically of a few guys on the U of A rugby team. I can go to them and say, hey, here's my problem as a coach that I'm dealing with. Here's my why. Here's my vision. Here's my understanding of everything. What do you think we need to do? I can only do that because they're a leader. If I was just managing them, I would have no capacity to get that information from them. They wouldn't understand what I'm talking about there. And so I think that's flipping the mindset of not trying to manage your team and keeping them on track, but trying to lead them and have leaders inside of that team. And this is one of those things that is almost frustrating because I'm like, crap, and now I sound like I'm just doing a tribe and purpose sales pitch. But folks, if you haven't noticed, we're legitimately just two leadership nerds who dove into this problem. And all of the solutions we're finding feed back into how we solve it inside of the business. That's why these conversations go that way. That's why the team of leaders is not just some idea that we're trying to sell businesses. It's like, no, this is actually something that you need to develop. That's why we put these things out for free too, right?
Yeah.
And I think that approach of having the leaders as those beacons for you throughout your team is just so great. And I think that's a much better way of looking at it than managing from the top down.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what I learned is that a maul is a great example. And folks, if you don't know rugby, we're talking M-A-U-L. And probably the last time that you saw, if you don't know rugby, the last time you saw a maul was last Sunday in a football game when the team on offense tried to run it up the middle, and then everybody came together.
The Eagles tush push.
Yes.
It's a great example.
Yeah. Came together, the linemen, the other backs, even the quarterback, and they pushed the running back across the goal line. That's a maul. That's not a scrum. They're NFL announcers.
Yeah, we'll never get that.
But just the fact of, I can't remember what game it was. The announcer actually used the correct terminology. He did not call it a scrum.
There we go.
He
I'll
called
take
it a maul. So it's M-A-U-L, and how a maul is just like your business, because I'm taking all the team members, certain number of team members, maybe all of them, because you can do that in a maul.
You sure can.
You can put all 15 of them in there, but maybe you just do 5 of them. And you're working together, and everybody knows not only why you're doing a maul, but where my part is in that maul. And I may be in the actual maul, or I may be out here, outside of the maul, ready to support it going forward. So, Cam, what'd you learn?
Gosh, it's really hard for me to get out of a maul analogy because I'm just thinking about how I coach defense on it, because it's a similar kind of thing. You know, it's understanding the individual job, what the team wants to get out of it, and then what you can do to help the team in that setting. But I think really it just goes back to this idea, and I know I said it, so it feels weird to say I learned it, but how the difference of management and leadership, I think, and how there's, and this is a whole nother conversation around people. There's certain types of folks who prefer to be managed versus led, and I think there's a lot of personal preference when it comes to that. But that as far as the leadership gap goes, and if you want that understanding in your team, that the only way you can do that is to have those different beacons, and the only way to have those beacons of leadership inside of your team is to take the time to invest into them, to take the time to make sure that they understand things. I'll tell a quick other thing we talked about. I've talked about with a bunch of these HR directors and CEOs is onboarding. and how people will come in and they just kind of get them up to speed and they go, all right, now go build the widget, and go get started. And it's like, no, literally just that. You take a little bit more time to be intentional about it, to teach them those leadership skills, the fundamentals of your business, the vision, all those kind of things. Now you have a beacon inside your team instead, and you do that, onboarding like Atlas does with GBLP, bringing on a bunch of interns, right? Now you have a team of people coming in that all understand, that are all on the same page. And I think it just, I don't know, one more example, sorry. The other thing that comes to mind with that is it's like you got to invest early. The river is easiest to cross at its source. To take an economic example, if you look at education gaps and all those kind of things, it starts from their kids. Best interventions, the ones you can get earlier, right? Best time to intervene on the leadership gap inside of your business is as early as you can with the onboarding.
And if you want to learn how to decrease your leadership gap, go to 10xyourteam.net. And right there, smack dab in the middle, is an icon that says the system. And the system is the Tribe and Purpose Leadership Development System. And that program right there will help you decrease that leadership gap. We want to help you approach zero in that leadership gap. You'll never hit zero. You'll always have that gap. However, more intentional you are in addressing it, the better off your company will be, the better off your business will be, your organization, and the more success that you'll have and everybody else. So go to 10xyourteam.net and click on the system, watch that video, then hit us up and we'll help you, walk you through how this program, this system, can help your business 10x in the next 5 years. Cam, run us out.
All right. Well, thank y'all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. And usually I thank our guest. I'd like to thank you for coming out and joining me in Tucson. It's always a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So thank you very much to my special guest for being here and getting to spend time with his granddaughter. As always, you can find a full archive of episodes of the show at 10xyourteam.net. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to share with other lifelong learners in your tribe so they can enjoy it too. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And we will see y'all next time.